I wasn't wrong. Do you remember when they closed all the gyms and the churches and the small businesses for your safety, but left open fast food stores and big box corporate stores and liquor stores because they were essential? Do you remember how when the kids did eventually go back to school but had to wear masks, but were told that they could play their full contact sports, but they had to wear masks during those sports in order to keep themselves safe? Do you remember that? Do you remember telling people how ridiculous that was? Remember how you tried to tell people and all you got in return was called names and shunned from society? Remember how confused you were in the beginning? It was like a switch flipped, and everyone around you suddenly had what you now know is called the fluoride stare. Just overnight, people who had the most common sense, just everyday normal people now suddenly were fighting people in Target because those other people weren't wearing masks. You remember that? Remember how fucking gobsmacked you were? Do you remember how when you finally did find people who thought like you did, who understood how this whole thing just seemed really, really off, but they were too afraid to stand up with you because they did not want to be publicly shamed? Too weak, so they just agreed with the masses in order to avoid that uncomfortable conversation or confrontation. Do you remember that? Do you remember the moment that it first dawned on you how quickly people would line up to protect the very system that was blatantly lying to them about everything to begin with? How absolutely vile and horrific those people got. But then do you remember when the next variant came? And it was a little less. And then when the next variant came, it was a little less. And then when the next variant came, it was almost nobody. It was almost like watching a garden blossom. Slowly but surely, all of the flowers started to open. Remember when it was understood that newest variant, latest variant wasn't going to work? And so they immediately switched to the war in Ukraine within 24 hours. And it took a few minutes, but the people eventually caught on and they started to revolt. They started to push back. When the Ukraine narrative started to fall apart, they went straight after Israel. And that took a little longer, but eventually we got there. We revolted for various different reasons, but revolted all the same. Do you remember how they're trying to scare everybody with the bird flu? How it was being spread to cows and then spread to people, and how your meat could be contaminated? People went out and bought chickens. They supplied themselves, their families, and their communities with eggs and chicken. They're actively doing it now. There's a whole side of TikTok dedicated to it. Remember by the end of this, when all big pharma was exposed for who they really are and what it was really about and who was getting paid and how much per jab, it trickled down from the vid to other medications. People are actively advocating for themselves when it comes to the things that they need medically. They're not just blindly following along. They're reading through side effects thoroughly. Who makes the medication, how much money they make, what other things that company's invested in. Remember in the beginning when everybody was screaming about save the children? And now Hollywood's fallen, and every single person in this country is fully aware of the problems that we have in regards to human and child trafficking, whether they believed the conspiracies or not. They are aware. And how that made victims of child and human trafficking comfortable enough to come out and share their stories and to seek help, which in turn then helped other victims of human and child trafficking. Do you remember when I told you the story about the Federal Reserve and how it was created during the height of typhoid fever? Now the dollar is failing. The very thing that keeps us a slave to the establishment. There are lots of rumors that it's now going to be backed by gold and silver again. I'm not wrong. It's just slow. And my biggest fear is that not everybody is going to make it to the end. But better days are coming.
To all my friends and family out there who know what's really going on, to all my conspiracy theorist friends, yes, sometimes it's a curse and not always a blessing to be awake. Awakening is the most liberating, alienating, excruciating, empowering, lonely, confusing, freeing, frightening, expansive journey. If you find yourself struggling as you try to process all the insanity, you are not alone. No one talks about the darkness that accompanies awakening, or the grief, not only grieving the life and illusions you once had, but the realization that almost everything you thought you knew is a lie. The beliefs you held, the people you trusted, the principles you were taught, all lies. Shattering illusions is rarely an enjoyable experience. There is a considerable amount of discomfort that comes with growth, and the grieving process doesn't stop there. With these newfound realizations, you then find yourself grieving all over again. Grieving the loss of many relationships with people who just don't get it. Feeling alone, being ridiculed and ashamed, not only by the masses, but for many of you, your very own family and friends too. Feeling like you no longer have much in common with these people you are surrounded by. Struggling with carrying on bullshit, shallow conversations that lack substance with those who are still fast asleep. Even feeling disconnected from your entire support system because they can't see what you see. Some even grieve the loss of their ignorance because ignorance is bliss and reality is harsh. Awakening can be a lonely road, and you will find often yourself journeying alone. There is no way to sugarcoat it. Awakening to the realities of this world are brutal. It will have you running through the entire gamut of human emotions. You have to master the art of diving down the darkest rabbit holes only to come out and still function in daily life. That is a skill, people, that don't get talked about enough. Some of you are struggling with feeling disconnected from family and friends. It's as though they exist in another world. Please know you are not alone. And not only are you not alone, you have an entire tribe standing with you. We may be separated by miles, but we are definitely deeply connected in purpose and spirit.
Even if I were pollinated and fully vaccinated, I would admire the unvaccinated for withstanding the greatest pressure I've ever seen. From partners, parents, children, friends, colleagues, and even doctors. People who are capable of such personality, courage, and critical ability are undoubtedly the best part of humanity. They are everywhere, in all ages, levels of education, states, and ideas. They are of a special kind. They are the soldiers that every army of light wants to have in its ranks. They are the parent that every child wants to have, and the children that every parent dreams of having. They are beings above the average of their societies. They are the essence of the people who have, built all cultures and conquered horizons. They are there, next to you. They look normal, but they are superheroes. They did what others could not. They were the tree that withstood the hurricane of insults, discrimination, and social exclusion. And they did it because they thought they were alone. And they believed that, they were the only ones. Banned from their families' tables at Christmas, they never saw anything so cruel. They lost their jobs, let their careers sink, had no more money, but they didn't care. They suffered immeasurable discrimination, denunciation, betrayal, and humiliation, but they kept on going. Never before in humanity has there been such a casting. Men, women, young, old, rich, poor, of all races or religions, the unvaccinated, the chosen of the invisible ark, the only ones who managed to resist when everything collapsed. That's you. You passed an unimaginable test that many of the toughest Marines, commandos, Green Berets, and even geniuses could not withstand. You are made of the stuff of the greatest who ever lived. Those heroes born among ordinary men who glow in the dark. Remember, you're the voice, and it's time to make it count.